Welcome back to Cottage Designs by Erin, where today I'm going to talk to you about cross stitch on linen. Cross stitch is making a comeback, and I don't know why really after all these years, but you know, everything kind of tends to circle back around. I started cross stitching in the early 90s, right after my daughter was born. And back then you could cross stitch. That was the cheapest hobby you could have, because the floss was inexpensive, the hoops were inexpensive, and everything at that point in time could be purchased at Walmart. So I cross-stitched for probably 10 years, maybe 15, and then I kind of fell off the map, and I bought a sewing machine. Once I bought a sewing machine, I switched over from cross-stitch to quilting. So it was a very relaxing hobby for me. I used to make the little tea towels and sachets and wall hangings and Christmas ornaments. I did a little bit of everything with it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Well, now that it's making a comeback, I thought, hey, you know what? I might just make a video on this. So one of my favorite projects that I ever did was the log cabin welcome. And this is a sampler, and the reason it's a sampler is it has the ABCs down here at the bottom. I've got a terrible glare here on the picture, but anyway, you get the idea. So when you open this up, who's it by? Canterbury Designs. When you open it up, you have this big glorious cross stitch chart, and I used to highlight where I was at so I wouldn't forget where I left off if I took a break or something. So once you start cross stitching on linen, you're going to need floss, little embroidery needles, some kind of hoop. This is a large hoop for a large design, but I really like these little old-fashioned sprig action embroidery hoops, the metal kind. Those are nice. And then you're going to need needles. I keep my needles in this little magnetic holder, and I have them marked. This says Ada 6, 11, 14, 16, 18, and then I have another one of these marked linen needles. And I haven't bought any embroidery needles for so long, so I don't know what the packages look like, but this is what they look like back in the 90s, okay? So once you get your supplies together, you're going to need, if you're new, you would start on 14 count Ada cloth. And I'm trying to say, okay, this is 14 count Ada cloth, right? Ada cloth right here. And it's by Charles Craft. And so when Walmart did away with their sewing center here in town in the 2000s, I went and bought a ton of these for like $1.50, because they were going to discontinue them, and it's becoming harder and harder to come by. So this is 14 count, and if you look at that up close, you can see it has a fairly large weave, and the holes are easy to see. Now, the higher you go up in number, the finer the quality fabric. So this is a 22 count hardanger, and if you look at that, the holes are teeny weeny tiny. And then even more difficult is a 28 count Irish linen. Let me show you that up close, so you can see how fine that is. So when you sew on a linen, you sew over 2 threads. What are you talking about, Erin? Okay, typically if you use a 14 count Ada cloth, you're going to use 3 strands of thread. If you use linen, you're going to use 2 strands. So you're going to divide your skein into two little threads. And then let me show you some more fabrics. Okay, so I have this old tote of linen fabric. And honestly, I mean, some of this is just what I've picked up at thrift shops and whatever. So here's a piece right here. They used to make it in all different colors, which I'm sure they still do, but I'm sure it's very expensive. This beautiful mauve. Let me bring this up here. Let me show you what's in the tote. So I have this big, beautiful doily that can be cross-stitched. I've got here's the raw Belfast linen. We also used to have a local cross-stitch shop, and it also went out of business. And when they went out of business, I went and bought linen by the bagful for practically nothing. So as you can see, I have quite the assortment of colors, designs. This is a very heavy tote full of nothing but cross-stitch fabrics. Oh, now we're getting into our 90s hunter green, our country blue. One day, Vicki and I were at a thrift store, and I found peach Ada cloth and about lost my mind. She said, "What is wrong with you?" I said, "When's the last time you saw peach Ada cloth? You'll never see it again." She's like, "There's a reason for that, Erin. I hate the color peach, but I love the color peach," so I was thrilled. Here's a beautiful orange. So I have a little bit of everything in here, and I've been keeping it for years and years and years in a tote with a lid on it. So let me throw that back down there. Okay, so here's a piece of linen. So you would take your linen, fold it. It's a bad folding job. And then wherever your fabric intersected at, that is the middle of the pattern, and that is where you start. So you now take your fabric and you put it in a little hoop. Whatever hoop for the size of design you're working with. This would be good for maybe a little ornament or something like that. And then you're going to take your 2 strands of thread, and you're going to start in the center of the cross-stitch design. Or you could start, here's an arrow, you could start on the outside edge, but most of the time you start in the center and you work your way out. So let's say I'm going to start with this little divot right, let's say here. So you pull your thread up. This is the center of my design. You could leave a little bit of a tail to go over, because you want to work that under your thread. Okay, now you are going to go over 2 threads. I'm trying to make sure that I am doing that. Okay, so over 2. And then let's say this is the only color you're going to use of that, and then you're going to switch thread. So then you would start a new color next to it. So you go up 2 over 2. So now you should have a little X in between your 2 rows. Okay, and that is how you arrive at your design. So this was it was a challenging pattern to do on linen because I was not used to working with that. I used a 20 count Irish linen by Charles Craft. This is 170 stitches high by 108 stitches wide. So this is a fairly large design. I don't remember how long it took me to make this, but I can tell you that it seemed like forever because it's a big pattern. So once you finish your design, and I won a first place ribbon for this in 2001 at the local fair. Let me flip this back. Once you finish your design, it's going to look like this. So you have all this very fine detail. So the trick to working this on linen, all your stitches should be going the same direction. So if you go to the right, you come back to the left. They all need to do that. I remember this log cabin part being tricky because you want to make sure all your rows lined up. And then here's all the little quilts. There, I like it that it has my name, Erin Cinzaletta Pennington, 2001. I mean, I have a sister-in-law who used to love my cross-stitch patterns, and I used to do a lot of homage designs. Those were my favorite. And I had them framed, and I gave them all to her, all of them. And I kept this one for myself because this was my blue ribbon winner, and this was the first thing that I had ever finished on linen. And I was just so elated that I finished this out. And so I find cross-stitch a very worthwhile hobby. Why? Well, it's inexpensive. It's challenging. It lowers your blood pressure. It is creative. So if you're wanting to start this, I would start with the pattern that does not have a lot of color changes or back stitching. Back stitching can be very difficult. Okay, so I want to show you the latest Halloween pattern that I bought on eBay. Look at this. It's only got 3 colors, 310, 317, 318. Similar to the log cabin that I made. The log cabin only had 3 colors, 3816, 3817, 3818. All right, this is a very large pattern. Look at how, wait till you see how cute this is. Oh, they've divided her into pieces. I don't know if I like that idea. Okay, so here's a quarter of it. And I guess you have to tape it and tape all your pieces together or just work on a little area at a time. But when you're done, you will have this big, glorious pattern here. It's a little witch. It's called Lady Halloween. I bought this off of eBay for like, I don't know, I want to say it was $12 or $15. I already had clearly the Ada cloth. And I bought the black skeins of thread for $1 each in a big box in case, so I didn't want to run out of black when I make this. So I bought a whole box of that. But I think it's sad that to me how times have changed and how you can't go to these little shops anymore. The little shop I used to go to was a little country blue house. And the lady loved cross stitch, and she had row after row, shelf after shelf of cross stitch, and she would finish your products for you. If you said, hey, I want this sewn into a pillow, she'd do that. Or if you said, do you think you could possibly frame this for me? If she had the time, she would do that. So let me show you now the cross stitch fanatic that I once was. I used to work for a company years ago called, it was like Home Interior, and of course Celebrating Home. And they had a deal one time where they had these big wicker baskets with little chalkboards on them. And so I won, let's see, I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. I have probably about 20 of these baskets. And so when I go out and I see a pattern I like this, which was marked down to $2 at Ben Franklin, I pick it up and put it in the basket. Will I ever get to it? I honestly do not know, because I tend to get overwhelmed with patterns. But I like to collect them, let's just be honest. So here's an old Amish pattern that I wanted to make that I never got to. It was P. Buckley Moss. P. Buckley Moss was a huge thing back in the 90s. Look at this big, massive, glorious chart. Look at that thing. That is something else. I will never get rid of that. Why? Because they don't make them anymore. You cannot find these types of materials any longer. I used to have a big, huge binder of nothing but garden patterns because I just love that theme. Here's another P. Buckley Moss. There's an old Halloween magazine. Christmas towels. Fruits and vegetables. Another one, fruits and vegetables with over dyed threads. These fancy that patterns were super cute. You know, and then they started getting really fancy and they started coming out with color patterns, which was, I mean, that was a novelty back then. So you could do like these little towels, and look, it was all in color. What a thought. Can't buy those now. Don't think I need teddy bears, but this was a little boy and girls. They used to make nursery patterns. Irish hearts, beautiful. Country. Country. More country. These I would probably not make anymore, but Here's some old cross-stitch magazines that I love, that I used to have a subscription to, which of course, some of these are no longer in print. Okay, this was beautiful. This is Paula Vaughn, and it's A Mother's Love, and it's a whole magazine of nothing but a mommy and a little girl. And I love this so much, and my daughter wanted me to make these for her. Well, then, as she got older, she's like, Mom, I don't want that anymore. But they're so beautiful. Look at this. Going to church together, reading stories, tucking in at night. It's just so precious. How could you not love that? Here's one I've always wanted to make, and I've even bought the floss for it and haven't got to it. It's oak leaves. Now, Erin, why would you want to make a pattern of oak leaves? I was raised out in the country in an 1800s house. When I was 9 years old, we moved into a country farmhouse, and it was surrounded by oak trees. And I've always loved oak trees ever since then, because I always felt like those trees protected us, let alone the fact they could probably fall on your house. I found them to be a very safe, a safe agent, I guess, in my life. And so I have an affinity for oak trees, so I have that in here. I've always enjoyed Amish designs. I did quite a few Diane Graebner's back in the day, and looks like I collected the patterns. I made Apple Time. I also made, looks like I've started to make this one. This is a little boy giving his mommy roses. Isn't it just precious? And then there's Told in the Garden. And Told in the Garden made designs like this. Excuse me, I just came in from mowing the yard, so I look a little worse for the wear. I have had a shower, but I look not up to par. Here's another Amish barn raising, quilting. Oh, butternut road. I love these old Victorian type patterns. And this is a school teacher, which is of course going to be near and dear to my heart. I mean, I've collected for years and years and years patterns. Okay, at one time I was into samplers. So here's a sampler that I collected. It's another one that's just all tonal, which is really nice. The problem I have now is I live in a little house. That's enough of that, I guess. And I don't have a lot of wall space. So if I make something, it probably needs to be like holiday oriented or something like that, where I'm only going to get it out, you know, maybe a couple times a year, once or twice a year, rather than leave it out all the time, because it's a little house and I just don't have the wall space. But I hope you enjoyed this video. So you learned the difference in cloths, 14 count and 8 cloth. We talked about needles. We talked about hoops. And we talked about patterns like this glorious pattern right here. If I make a pattern, I keep it on into perpetuity. So that way then, if I ever want to remake it or revisit it, I have it. So I hope you like my video. Please like and subscribe and give it a thumbs up for more ideas in the future. Thank you.